All right. Good. Almost afternoon. Caroline, can we get a roll call for the board? Please?
Commissioner Hurd.
Here.
Commissioner Easterby.
Here.
Commissioner Mandel.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
Commissioner Oldby is absent. Yeah, 4 members.
Okay. Board minutes first, second item is the approval of the April 16th, 2024 minutes. Included in the package. Were there any questions that anybody had on those? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve.
I so motion.
I'll second.
Caroline?
Commissioner Easterby.
Yes.
Commissioner Hurd.
Yes.
Chair Mandel.
Yes.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Yes.
All right, this motion carries 4-0.
Okay. Third item, special presentations. Hayslip, over to you.
Thanks for having me. Oh, ours turn green when they're on. Let's see here. Share screen.
Green means what? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She, I don't know. I use on the right side.
And buying me some more time to eat.
Yeah.
There we go.
See, that's what happens when you start a meeting early.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't even have to ask if everybody can see my screen. It's obvious. Once again, thanks for having me. Hazel Page, Director of Public Works, City Engineer for the town of Mammoth Lakes. This presentation I put together for Town Council last week. Town Council did accept the report. Little bit different audience today, same presentation. So if I can go off script, it's because it's, a little bit more, I won't say casual, but I'm open to take questions during the presentation. You kind of want to know what's going on, a little bit more detail. Don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask me what's going on because it's a slightly different audience today. I'm going to go over kind of the background and purpose of this document, how we developed it, some of the key elements of the document, and some of the key elements of the improvement plan. And all these titles make a little bit more sense here in a second. Again, know your audience. I don't need to belabor the winter storms of 22-23. We all know it was disruptive, significant damage, property damage, infrastructure damage, public and private. 29 agencies participated in the response. And we try to communicate this incident as a slow-moving, evolving, compounding incident. Started off with some snow, then we had structural failures, then propane issues, and then back to snow, and all this happening in, over the course of a couple of months, not like a earthquake or a flood or something that happens quickly. This was a compounding incident, and from our perspective. So the after action report, this is a document that is required by the state to kind of document the response of the incident. So includes, the timeline, all the actions taken by the various parties. And then it kind of ends with a call to action, kind of incentivizing or asking or requesting or requiring all the various parties to make changes. So we took the contract to town council in September of 2023, which was a number of months after the incident. And it wasn't because the town was sitting on its hands. We were trying to get our partners to jump on the same report. So we're trying to get Inyo County, Mono County, City of Bishop, to join the team to put together a regional report. In the end, they decided to go their own way and do their own documents. And so we took this to contract. September, we got everything executed in October, and from October till effectively May, we were working nonstop on this thing. We did not flinch at hiring a consultant. We literally just asked everybody who's the best in the country at writing after action reports. One name rose to the top, Constant Associates. We went directly to them, contracted directly with them to do all this work, and they were fabulous to work with on this document. They helped shepherd this thing along and helped us create a really, really good document. So the development, it started out with a very comprehensive review of existing documentation. So the incident management team reports, photographs, dailies, anything out of the news, basically anything staff had related to the incident went to Constant Associates. And then from that, they started to digest it, and they came up with a plan to do some facilitated discussions. So we had 4 of these. These were all in person. They were broken down into public safety, transportation and snow removal. So that was like the town, county, and Caltrans, talking about building and structural issues. So the building teams, the engineering teams, we had the propane teams, all in participation of this, and conversations, asking a lot of questions, so that the consultant could understand what happened. And then there was a meeting with the town leadership and management. So we had council members, Alish, and then the town team. And then from there, the consultant, took that information, what they learned, and then they had targeted interviews. So they learned a lot through the facilitated discussions, and then they wanted to hone in on very key aspects. And so they had one-on-ones, and this included folks locally, people from Cal OES, some of the agencies from down south. They really dug deep. And then they did a number of surveys. A couple of the bigger ones were with the hospital and their staff, and then the business community through the chamber, trying to get as much information as possible. And they took that information and they started putting together the document, the drafts. There's an executive summary, for all the people who want the cliff notes, and then a deep dive into an incident review. So all the statistics, the timeline, maps, a narrative of what happened, and just kind of, memorializing what happened. And from all their analysis, they came up with 8 key themes, and I'll go through those in a little bit more detail. And a conclusion, obviously. And then probably the most important aspect of this document is the improvement plan. That's the real call to action. So each of the key themes that they honed in on included a narrative. They had all the participating agencies who was involved that particular subject. The strengths, what we did well, what they thought we were successful in, and then areas for improvement and the recommended actions. And those all roll up into the improvement plan. I'm going too fast, just yell. Okay. So the 8 themes they came up with were the town leadership and management. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Should interrupt you anytime.
Yeah, totally.
Are there pages that follow this, or is there places I can keep notes to just my own?
I don't know what was in the pocket.
Yes, the package just includes the full
Okay.
after action review. We don't have the PowerPoints,
Ah,
but I can get you a copy of the PowerPoints.
is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I emailed you the
You
town
did
council.
email it to me.
I did make a couple tweaks, so I'll send you
Sweet.
this current version when I get back to the office. Okay. Key themes. So we had public information and messaging, social services and sheltering. That was really Mono County that kind of took the lead on those. Visitation and business impact. So working with the chamber and John Erdy and his team. Fire and public safety, that's you guys. Transportation and snow removal was really the town. Public Works, County Public Works and Caltrans. Building and structural issues, that's a number of the engineering and building department teams. And then finally, really honing in on the propane and utility issues that we saw. From that, some key projects kind of came out of that. Those recommendations for improvements, like I mentioned, from those 8 key themes go into the improvement plan. Like I said, this is the most important piece of the document. The IP for each one of those recommendations or calls to action, if you will, There's a responsible party or an organization. There's a priority and milestones for completion and kind of notes on the status of each of those recommendations. And this is a living document. So this thing doesn't go away, doesn't get put on the shelf. It's something that we're going to continue to refine and work on for probably years. There's some things that are going to take a long time for us to resolve. And so internally, we're working on a process so this will be reviewed and updated. So the IP, it's a table, it's an Excel format. And so we can make adjustments in real time as we kind of work through these different elements.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
Who is the keeper of that? Who is responsible for ensuring that it continues to come up in front of council and everything else in terms of status?
Yeah, great question. So this is a town document. Town manager is ultimately responsible. Right now, we're managing this with the entire department head team. So this is all of the executives and higher management, Alice and
Okay,
fire and the police chief, all participating in that. And then we haven't identified who's going to be kind of the enforcer, if you will. We're still working through this. We just, adopted it last week and we discussed it at our meeting last Thursday. But there will be someone who holds everybody else responsible because we don't want to lose sight of this thing.
right.
I put this up just as an example. This is, it's all in the last part of the AER includes all the improvement plan. I just wanted to have an example just to show like how it's structured, how it's organized, how it can be updated with the status and due dates and priority and who's responsible. We didn't put any names because names will change, but we did in a number of locations identify positions. I want to walk through just a couple of the key projects, just to give you an example of the spread here. There's a lot of different types of things that we need to work on. For instance, we're all aware that our friends over at Google and Apple like to direct the public into unsafe and hazardous conditions. So we're working with Mono County IT and these agents, these companies to have them update their maps. What we've learned, fun fact, is that we can do a road closure. And as soon as SAR drives past that kind of geo-fenced area, their cell phones will ping and Google will think that road is now open and then reopen it on our map. So some crazy challenges we are trying to work through because even first responders out doing a call will reopen a road. So this is pretty complicated, but it's very important to us because we all know how many calls we get to go out on to deal with this stuff. This is a big one and one I encourage you to kind of follow. The current hazard mitigation plan doesn't have any specific projects. And we're going to change that. We want actionable elements in the regional hazard mitigation plan. This is Mono County. I'm sure you guys are aware, takes care of our local hazard mitigation plan. I believe they have either hired a consultant or they selected a consultant that's going to the board. And so all this work is going to happen here shortly. What I told town council is it's our job to make sure these recommendations, these projects move from the after action report into the regional hazard mitigation plan. This is really important to have continuity between these documents. We also had a lot of challenges translating into Spanish in real time. We put out a lot of messages during this event and we were up late at night trying to figure out how to put stuff out. And we didn't have a way to put things into Spanish quickly. And so we're working on a couple of different processes. We have some staff that we've identified that will now be part of these meetings and translating in real time. And these are not professionals, they're not polished, but at least we can get the information out. And then we have protocols with, contracts and protocols to work with outside agencies to do more refined translation so that we can have, better, flyers and so forth during these emergencies. A relief facility. During the emergency, we were spread out all over the place. We had, the group in Bishop, we had Edison Theater, we had the police station, we were using Suite Z as a warming center. We were using all kinds of different facilities and we need to work to consolidate some of that. You may be aware that the town is building a new town hall. And as part of the design development, we created an emergency operations center. We don't have the funding right now to construct it. We actually have a couple of grants out right now to bring in the money to hopefully get this thing built, but we have designed it into our facility, integrated all the systems into our new facility. So it has bunk rooms, community kitchen, like a community pantry, warming center, cooling center, and spaces to have emergency operation type meetings so that we can have a one-stop shop at a community building to kind of be a beacon in these types of emergencies, something that we were critically lacking in our last emergency. And we believe our building codes and community standards are inadequate to address the significant snow loading. And this also includes some of the infrastructure deficiencies related to propane. So this is something we are working on right now. We have some consultants doing some analysis on some of the codes, but working with Alish and the building department, there are some actions we've already taken that we can do unilaterally as a town to influence change. So propane infrastructure in the street, for new construction, we're already implementing some of these today, and then we'll be working to change standards and codes through, town council. That's a process. Go ahead.
Can you work to require retrofit? For example, a lot of the post and beam footings
Mhm.
on some older buildings built in 1971, they're sinking, the floors are sinking. And I would argue it's not from this one event, it's from multiple events. But I've seen where we need to go in and create new footage, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. So is there a way we can acquire retrofits?
Requiring is difficult because we have we call them existing non-conforming, right?
Right.
And they're just no longer up to current standards.
It's
And
ordinance and law, essentially.
right. And it's hard to enforce that on existing structures. What we plan to do is have a series of different standards. So at a certain point in reconstruction or remodeling, you'll trigger a threshold that will require you to bring certain things into code. And then we're looking at doing incentive programs. And this is geared more towards the propane side of things, and the structural thing is using some of our financial resources through our, franchise agreement to create grant programs to incentivize the public, put money out there and say, hey, if you do these things, we'll pay for it. So we're going to hopefully have a multifaceted approach to bringing structures into compliance, but the structural stuff is difficult. You kind of have to wait until, they're ready to do the work. It's hard to influence them. We can also influence it through like certified properties, like all the work that Rob has been doing on the Airbnb side of things to make sure that they're compliant. If they pass a certain threshold, they may no longer be eligible to do rentals. That may incentivize people. So looking at all kinds of different programs to kind of deal with what we know is an issue out there with existing non-conforming structures.
You need any help? I can point to all the deficiencies that are causing fires and problems. I see it.
We've got a healthy list,
I'm sure you do.
and it's going to take. This is one of those things that's going to take some time,
Of course.
And we're going to see a lot of pushback. You tell somebody the snow loads are going to increase by a couple 100 pounds. That's a lot of money, and so this is going to take some work.
Okay.
So any support we can get will be
Thank
appreciated.
you.
Like I said, I only wanted to highlight a couple. If you guys want to take a deep dive in the IP, I'm happy to come back and talk about any aspect. You're welcome to email me or the team with any questions you may have. I just didn't want to get up here and pontificate for 2 hours about this document. So kind of our next steps, like I mentioned, it's a living document. So we're going to continue to manage and update the improvement plan. We're working on assigning and completing those tasks. And those are not just town. Like there's tasks that Chief's name's on, my name's on, Mono County's on, Caltrans. We've got a lot of partners that are involved in completing specific tasks. Like I mentioned, incorporating the IP into the HMP, the improvement plan and the hazard mitigation plan is key to the long-term success of this document. So
Hayes, were there any specific recommendations or findings around propane itself?
yes,
The lack of,
yes. Yeah.
phrase that, the inability to spot and identify and the lack of coordination from suppliers.
Yes, there were a number of very specific targeted comments towards the propane industry.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, some of those things are already in play.
Did they get a copy of this?
Everybody, yeah, it's public.
I
and
mean,
they-
no,
Yeah,
the propane industry, yeah.
yes, they were a part of the process. They
Because I
actually,
mean, one of the frustrating things that just to be candid, we talked about this a lot of times, they were not just unhelpful. They refused to do anything in terms of, even though they've got monitors on all the equipment, being able to provide an app, correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
being able to, willing to provide a map where equipment was, those kinds of things. And to me, that's just, that's criminal.
yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay.
Like I said, there's a lot of targeted elements in this document and I'm happy to discuss any aspect of that in any amount of detail, either here or in a separate meeting. I will add that this isn't going to sound right. This event was very timely because we were working on a franchise agreement with the largest provider in town. And it allowed us to switch gears and come to the table with a whole new set of requirements. And I can say that what we required was heard loud and clear. We've already received all of the mapping. So all of the data they have is now our data, and there's a commitment to update that. They've made commitments to have pre-positioned resources in advance of emergencies. And a number of other little things. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because
That's fine.
but this will all get daylighted in public through town council when we bring an amendment to the franchise agreement, and a new agreement in June of 25 that needs to be complete. So, yeah, I mean, moral of the story is town of Mammoth Lakes is taking everything we learned from this incident very, very seriously. And propane is just one aspect of a multifaceted response. But we need to keep on the gas pedal on all these fronts, from structure to propane and transportation and everything. So that's all I got for you guys. I am happy to field any questions. I know I kind of just ran through that. Let me know what you're thinking.
Just a comment, Hayes, but just talking about the propane and the franchise agreements. And I have to really commend the town and Constant Associates, because I was there in that meeting with you and Chief Meyer and representatives from AmeriGas, Eastern Sierra Propane, SCE, and it was a contentious meeting as part of the after action report. But I really thought that Constant did a good job kind of moderating that, and I'm obviously very supportive of the recommendations that came out of the report. It's a really good report. Obviously this is a public document. How is this and obviously I know you presented to council, you're here. I'm sure you'll continue the show. How is this being communicated kind of to the general public?
Well, we have these public meetings. We try to let people know it's available. We'll put it out on our webpage and kind of go through social and invite the public to take a look at it. But the apathy is a little high around town. And so we'll see what we get from a response. We pushed really hard for community engagement throughout this entire process with all the various user groups and community groups and so forth to try to encourage their participation in the development of this document. Because at the end of the day, it is a community document. I mean, it's going to influence change, and we wanted everyone to be a part of it. So hopefully it gets out there and people take a look at it and provide us their thoughts. We are going to translate this document in its entirety into Spanish once we've kind of gotten through kind of the roadshow, if you will, when we've kind of got our last little bits of comments and we're comfortable, because it is prohibitively expensive to continuously update it. But our goal is to push it out to the Hispanic community as well and make sure they're aware of what we're working on.
Would it be appropriate to link a copy of this report on our website?
Absolutely.
I mean, that might just, as we fumble down the path with communication on response, those kinds of things. Just an update. I don't know how many more people come to our website, less people on the town website.
And it's extremely difficult. We have these discussions on transparency and outreach on multiple issues, and We're certainly trying. You don't get people's attention until things start exploding, unfortunately.
Yep.
If I could just kind of reframe this in kind of a district perspective. Chief Freehold always said, you can see how far you've come by what you're talking about. When I started in 2022 as the fire chief, I had 3 priorities: recruitment, retention, wildfire, and propane. Propane, unfortunately, kind of my concerns came to bear in that winter. This is incredible right here, and I really have to, again, kind of reinforce what I said at town council. I really appreciate the work that the town staff, primarily Hayes, taking the lead on this to get this out there. This truly does provide us with the appropriate framework now, and it's our job to run with this. There's certain items, that presentation was focused kind of at, town, priorities, and they're very important, but there are some here that specifically align with kind of the strategic priorities of the fire district. We need to make sure that we're working on those. So these will be not so much a standing item, but you'll have chief officer reports on this on a fairly regular basis. These aren't things you fix overnight. These are things that take years, especially when you're working, trying to work backwards. I feel like we have a responsibility to draw a line and things moving forward. We have to immediately work to adjust, and we have a very strong game plan on that. In parallel with, while this has been occurring, a lot of these things didn't sit for last year and nothing happened. There have been significant amount of project work that's been occurring in parallel with this. We've got such kind of an ad hoc group that Hayes put together with his team and a couple members of our team to really start looking at, what should the code and regulations look like moving forward. And that's taken quite a bit to really balance all these issues of economic realities of building, which is already difficult in this community. And how do you do that in a way that also puts a solution out there that's actually effective in the middle of a winter when we have 700 inches of snow. So we have a good idea of where we want to go with quite a few of these things. There's other things that we're working on, again, kind of on alignment of economics, politics, and finance. This puts us in a really good spot, and I will be getting back to you on a regular basis as far as what the progress is from the district side as well. I'd say the 2 issues that are kind of at the top of my list. One is the whole code, which is complicated. There's, again, everything moving forward, and then what is reasonable to look at for things that are already existing in town. The other side of it is kind of district protocols for response. So ideally, we're handling propane incidents from the mitigation side, which is, always better. I'll tell you that you can do that very well, and you're still gonna have to have some sort of response capacity. We had last week 2 propane calls occur at the same time. One was at a town council member's house, who was trying to do everything right, but the contractor ended up hitting a line for multiple reasons. There's multiple things done wrong to lead to that outcome. And so there's always gonna be a need for that response capacity. That being said, we have got so good at propane and comfortable with propane that sometimes, we're really pushing the boundaries. We saw that last winter. So having, we have very good training. There's things that we do that, are certainly within kind of the capacity of the fire service, but because this is such a unique hazard for our community, we need to have a standing protocol on what our response side looks like. So those would be the 2 portions that we need to move on relatively quickly. Those all obviously have downstream implications, right? So how we respond is going to have implications for how we mitigate these incidents, what that does. So these will have ripple effects. But again, I really appreciate the work and the leadership that the town put into this, because it's setting us up for a right path forward.
Very nice. I know a lot of work, what you just presented was a capsule of all the district towns.
And that's the work of the entire community. It's not just the town. Alice was he's one of the family over at the town now. You got all the keys and everything. He just comes on in. He's part of the crew, because we all have to work together on these things. This is really, really important to the community to be successful and implement the stuff.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for lunch.
All right. Any general public comment? I think we have. Oh, yes.
Since I'm here,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Hazel Page, Director of Public Works, the town of Mammoth Lakes. I'm sure you're all aware, because you watch town council, that last week I made some comments related to some significant road work about to take place in the town. Just last Wednesday, town council authorized two contracts, one for a road and MUP rehabilitation project and one for a slurry seal project. These are very large, nearly $5 million in total projects, and they will be very disruptive, excuse me. And they will probably start sometime the second or third week of June. So we don't have a lot of time to do communication on these projects. What we are going to put forward as our comp plan, what we've already kind of started on, is there'll be an ad in the paper and some flyers that we put together with a QR code, kind of talking about the totality of the project on the town website with some maps outlining all of the roads we're going to be working on, all the MUPs we're going to be working on. And then we will push out through social media kind of daily updates. So since we've just awarded the contracts, we don't have full schedules yet. We don't know kind of the game plan. But it kind of doesn't matter because we know 8 hours into the first day of construction, everything is going to change. And then we'll be asking the contractor to move around. Like we can't have them working on Old Mammoth Road during motocross. So we will be shuffling our pieces throughout the construction season to get this work done. So we will push out daily updates. So if you were following us on social media during the Cal OES trucking exercise we did, we were pushing out daily updates. So we would see what the contractor completed. We'd huddle up in the office in the evening, kind of get a feel for what the game plan is. And then we would push that information out to the public and say, we're going to be over here tomorrow. We're going to be here Friday, and try to give as much advance notice as possible. The contractor is also required to do door hangers to kind of, let everybody know who's in charge, but I don't think that's going to be enough. We got to put more information out there because most of the work for like slurry seal is on arterials, Minaret, Meridian, big roads that are going to be pretty disruptive. They are required to maintain traffic control at all times and so forth. And if there is a closure, we will be communicating that specifically to our emergency response partners, make sure that they get that specific communication. But just heads up, it's going to be a busy summer for us. This is just a couple of some very significant projects going on and kicking off here in the next week or two.
Total time.
Slurry seal probably will be in the neighborhood of 11 to 12 working days, so 2.5 weeks. The rehabilitation project could be upwards of 2 months.
That's grind.
It's grind, yeah. Some of it's pulverized all the way down to base and complete reconstruction. And it's all over town. We try to spread the love to all the various neighborhoods. We're also spreading the pain to all of the various neighborhoods.
One thing that was helpful in the most recent and ongoing extended work by the Limelight, their underground infrastructure, was because they live off Convict Drive. So I have to remember, don't go up behind the village to get home. So I, go up in a number of different ways, but I have ways to go around it. And I just happened to see on Facebook a mapping where this is all occurring. Will you be doing kind of that kind of thing, updating?
Exactly. Yeah. And the QR code will kind of push people to our social media pages, through the town and through the police department.
Yeah.
And we'll be putting out that messaging, just like what you've been seeing. That's exactly the kind of communication we plan to do. And, that Limelight thing has been incredibly disruptive, and we've been pushing them hard to get out of our hair before this weekend. We'll see how that turns out.
Good luck. Yeah. It's gotten better. Ish.
I had to tell them if I have to choose between them having electricity and tourism, the lights will be dark until fall.
Yeah.
So they've gotten the message that they need to move, because we can't do detours to the lakes basically. But I appreciate your comments. I'm glad it's actually getting into people's phones and so forth.
Yeah, I see it. And there's workarounds.
Is there any opportunity, may not look at this, to geotag people as they come in town Because I'm not worried as much about the locals as I am about, people trying to get to the village and they go up and it's like, well, I can't turn here now or whatever. Is there a way to, I mean, for a year, I got to push every time I picked up my phone from Ski and Sport, right? Right across the top, hey, do this. Is there some way to do that?
We do have that ability to push out geofence messaging. I would be cautious about doing that for, this type of a project. I don't want to get, what's the adage, crying wolf, I want to reserve that type of messaging for real life safety type issues. But if we did get into a situation where we're going to be, landlocking a community for a period of time, we may consider that.
Okay.
But I don't anticipate that happening. I think we'll be able to keep flow of traffic open. It'll just be disruptive. There'll be a lot of cones and a lot of arrow signs and some detours, but we should be able to manage it and keep people flowing, and the locals will figure it out. And the tourists will just, go on a little adventure from time to time. No, that's all I had.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very helpful. Number 5, consent agenda. So we have none. And so we'll pop into item 6, chief operating budget.
So the review of the budget begins on page 58. And we actually have 3 items under budget. We have review of budget, operating year to date. We'll have the receipt of the second apportionment from the county, and then as well as information on our posting and adoption process. They're a little commingled, so I'm gonna speak to them kind of all at once, and if you need more information on the second, so I'll include it. On 58, we'll be starting with our income, and as you're aware, our income is primarily kind of in 2 large chunks. We receive our first apportionment in January, then our second apportionment right around this time. So from a budgeting perspective, we're really not seeing more revenue until the second half of our fiscal year, and we're really not seeing our second apportionment, which makes up 35 to almost 40% of our budget till right before the end of the year. We actually receive our third apportionment, which gets pushed back into the budget in the next calendar year. So the second apportionment is pretty critical from a glide path perspective. It is item 2, but we did receive our second apportionment from the county for 1.577 million. And I'll come back kind of through the line items, but what that does is it takes our revenue side of the budget to about 4.6 million. So about 300,000 over budgeted. I think that's positive. I wouldn't get too excited as I go through the budget. We'll go through kind of what the implications of all of that are as we get there. But that is a good place to be. And again, our budget's initially set off of our ABA projections. Moving down, there's a couple other revenues that have not gotten as far as we'd like based on kind of past experience. The filing and miscellaneous fees are just down. I think Chief Morrow gave a report on why that is. It's a combination of both slowing down as well as how they're pulling their reports. We have not received our ambulance income, and some of that is just due to company that does our ambulance billing swapped. So we're using a new company. Engineer Jason Compton's been tasked with working on moving that over. The reality is there's a significant amount of work to move over to that new billing company, and we're going to be tackling that here shortly. We just had a couple other strategic priorities. Once we do that, we can still back bill for those calls, and traditionally that's kind of how we've worked on those. So I do anticipate that number to go up. We do have lease revenue that was not budgeted for, but has been coming in. So that is now shown on the budget. I'd caution against putting it on next year's budget so we get some clarity as far as working through the process of getting that set how actually in place. But in the big scheme of things, again, it's not a significant part of our revenue. Again, our project was primarily from the communication perspective important to Old Mammoth Communications. So again, where that's going to put us is roughly 4.6 million on the budget, which is slightly higher. It's very difficult at this time. There's clearly new projects coming in, so you're seeing an increase in actual square footage, which is taxable property. And we're also seeing inflation, right? And being able to gauge what that's coming in at has been tough. So our budgeting's been appropriate, but I would be cautious to spend money until we have a good understanding of what the implications on that are. The place that we hit the hardest with it is capital expenditures. Just as an example, I'm not sure if we mentioned this last week, but our primary utility was hit in accident, 3391, which is kind of our go-to utility that gets worked every single day. The insurance for that individual who was at fault will cover $5,000 towards the vehicle. Today's replacement cost is on the conservative side, say on the optimistic side, 90,000, but probably closer to if you built it as currently exists, as a true utility with compartments, it's $100,000 vehicle. And our insurance will, and Chief Walker's working through this, he can probably provide a little more information. Basically, I'm not expecting that any sort of insurance coverage for that will replace it. 91 was scheduled to get replaced in about 2 years here, but at the old cost, we had about $50,000 allocated. So just the incremental increases on vehicles, our ladder truck, which we bought for about $1 million, you're looking at about $1.6 million today. So those are things that we're gonna have to adjust for before we get too excited about being, kind of high on the revenue side. We keep bumping these things up, but we're gonna have to kind of continue that process. It's not really what today's about, but as far as we work through that budgeting process for next year and what things should look like. We also have had, I actually believe that I was being conservative when I put in 62,000 for the assistance for hire category. Assistance for hire is sending our engines out across the state. We did send them out twice for 2 weekends, and one of them ended up getting backdated to last fiscal year because of what they went out. So 33 represents about a weekend of an engine company providing services outside of the district. I am again, very confident that last year was just a significant outlier from the standard fire season that we see. And the goal for the Wildland program is that we have that engine company out on a regular basis. If we can get this program built out right, there should be an engine serving somewhere across California at any point in time. There's a lot of factors that go into that, including the fire season. But the other part of it is just building up that reputation, having that rig that gets regularly called to go out. So I'm comfortable that that's the number that we should see improve if we can keep a wildland program going over the long run. Any questions on revenues? So moving into personnel costs, and we covered this a little last meeting. I'm not going to get as into the details I did last time, but a couple of things. When we started up the wildland program, we were originally pulling it from the part-time firefighter category. So that category is slightly high because of that reason, but a couple other ones as well. And the wildland program is slightly low. I ran some numbers on kind of where we've been with staffing, and a lot of times it's really hard to give you an idea of how many people we have out working. We're incredibly small from a full-time staff, and our full-time number is currently at 3 for the firefighters. We do intend to refill that 4th spot. One of the reasons we were waiting on that is we were seeing if we would receive the USDA grant that had a significant match. Fortunately, we did not receive that USDA grant, so we are going to move forward with that hiring for that 4th firefighter. Really, those 4 firefighters are kind of just for core services for the district. They have specific tasks that they work in: training, administration, wildland prevention, and fleet and facilities. But the reality is they're also helping each other out. And we did stretch the staff by only having 3 full-time firefighters. It just creates too much stress on the staff, and getting back to 4, I think is kind of a minimum that we can look at for core services. And as we take a look for next year and project, how would the budget look if we did receive a ballot measure? How would the budget look without receiving a ballot measure, I feel that that 4 is kind of a minimum number if we don't have any new revenues, just to keep the place moving. So we will be rehiring for that position shortly. The part-timers are, again, a little bit harder to put your thumb on, but a couple numbers I think are super relevant, and so this kind of answers, Commissioner Curry always has questions of trying to bring more people on. I've been trying to do that as much as possible. So roughly, this is looking at to this point in the fiscal year. 2 years ago, when I first came on, we had about 14,000 hours that were being worked by our part-time staff. We made some changes in the MOU due to kind of the volunteer part-time issue where we essentially weren't paying people to come for trainings. And last year that number went up to 18,000. So there's a 4,000 hour difference there. Some of that had to do with the emergency and actually having more hours work with people coming in. Some of it had to do with not true hours, but compensating people for training, which I believe is the right thing to do for our part-timers and training being fundamental for their safety. But this last year, we went from 18,000 to 24,000 hours of part-time work. So we've gone up another 6,000 hours of work being done here. There's a whole bunch of areas that you can see that and not see that. The biggest one is obviously the wildland program. Last year, we had 6 people on that. We extended to 7, where we're trying to get some additional engine coverage. This year, we've actually brought that number up to 8 because we're trying to cover for the Forest Service not having an engine or a water tender in town. So our goal is to get to 7-day coverage of an engine in town while we're also working projects within the community. We've also added a Fix It Friday, and it's basically 3 positions currently, to where we have individuals who are newer to the district but want to help with kind of working through equipment, working on the facilities. And 2 years ago on Fridays, Captain Kaler didn't have anybody with him. So he was essentially the only person responding. So we had people come in from pages. We now have 3 individuals that are working 10-hour shifts. So that adds up to 1,500 hours of work that's getting done and additional capacity when the call comes in. So sometimes it can be easy to miss. There's nobody here today, but on the weekend we had a 131 class, which is firefighter 1. Sorry, the Forest Service does it backwards. We go from 1 to 2, they go from 2 to 1. We had how many people in class from our side? So we had 17 of our firefighters in class this weekend taking that class. We also had an outreach with Antelope Valley, June Lake were here. Cal Fire taught the class, BLM assisted with it. So there are a lot of things happening in the background, and today's actually the first day I think the wildland program has had a day off. They were here through the weekend. They worked yesterday on helping out at the Camp High Sierra because they're trying to open up, stepping on Bob's toes a little bit because they'll cover all their work. And they're back in class tomorrow. So sometimes we can miss a lot of those little things that are going on, but there's quite a bit of, again, it's a 6,000 hour difference of the amount of work being put in just from the part-time staff. The full-time staff is working their butts off. They're already here probably more days than they should be. But as far as, why these numbers are reflected this way, I understand they're above budget. I feel that kind of telegraphing where we believe the budget was going to go, I was comfortable with that. The nice thing is those are things that we can scale up and scale down depending on how things are going. But ultimately, they're the right thing to do. And frankly, if the Forest Service cannot put on an engine, we've kind of made that commitment that at least for this year, we are going to work to make sure that we're providing services for the community. So we will have at least some level of wildland coverage here. Long term, that's not sustainable without some sort of external factor. Again, that 5-year grant didn't go through. So our best solution is the ballot measure, which we're considering in late July, early August. And again, kind of putting all of that in perspective of the budget. Other than that, our personal costs are relatively on glide path. We're at 85%. We have 1 more pay period. Again, we're on a 13 pay period cycle, but there's also some adjustments that Bill Green makes that you don't see at the end of the year that put in about a half a pay period. So relatively on glide path with personnel costs. Moving down to administrative costs. Again, the kind of largest category there is miscellaneous consulting, which is kind of two factors. Primarily, it's the work that we're doing on considering this ballot measure and potentially moving forward with that. The other part of it is a little bit of work on the cell tower. We had some consulting on the front end. There may be more of that as that moves forward. I'll go, a little bit later with that. The other thing I'd say is in some ways, the admin and kind of the utilities costs are a good indicator of just that, overall inflation factor that we're seeing. Every single year I bump food up. Every single year, food is going up, above 100%. And that's really just been the case for the last 4 years. So, that's one that just reminds me that we are still seeing kind of inflation within the budget, and we'll probably have to bump these categories up again this next following year. Insurance liability is still increasing. We are in a 3-year contract with SDRMA. We can take another look after that contract ends. There's no great solutions there currently. I think we are just representative of the insurance industry as a whole and what people are seeing both on their business side as well as on their personal side. But it is a factor that's impacting our ability to operate. Any questions on admin expenses? Moving into logistics. So a couple things on here. It doesn't reflect it here, but one of the things that I'm trying to do long-term is really separate out our annual operating budget and then create a full capital expenditure budget. And it's always been difficult because we've had a little bit of overlap and you don't want to show revenues when you don't have them appearing on the same budget. Same thing with costs, but there's been different ways of handling that. As an example, after I printed this report, we did actually receive our turnouts that were off of a grant in the previous year. And a lot of times you wouldn't see that reflected on the budget from a revenue side because the grants were kept separate, but you would see that hits the PPE budget here. So there is another 40,000 going into PPE. It's putting us in probably the best position we've been in with turnouts in a very long time. But some of the discussion we'll have over the course of the next couple of meetings is how do we really make those so we can understand our annual operating costs and our capital expenditures, but also recognize, okay, if we're going to take this 40,000, put that in capital expenditures, are we also putting the money in there so that we can, make sure that we can purchase those turnouts in the future? And that's where, again, I have a rough number of what that is just at current glide path, 10% of the budget, which is, we're looking at that. So if we're sitting at a $4.3 million budget, we should be putting 430,000 into capital expenditures. Kind of at our current practices, as you're aware, we're about 150,000. So there's some room to make up some things there. But again, those are kind of gradual steps that we need to get to over time. I will say, these are small items, but they're important to the public. Hydrants, Chief Walker is going to be working really hard to kind of get us caught up from the mess that we're in today, which is a accumulation of just years of not being able to service them as much as we want to, although it's no way not that we are servicing them as well as we can, but there's 700 of them. And just looking at, replacing all the stakes and the signs, you're looking at several $100 of just for the stakes, the signs. So we're going to be tackling this strategically over the next couple of years, but those are the little things that just take time and effort. We are working through to try to get to. Equipment maintenance is kind of right there, what we'd expect. And that's with just kind of a standard year. We have not had, any large events other than kind of, the standard maintenance that we see kind of on every year. So these are categories that traditionally Chief Harper used to put in what he called shock absorbers. And we would see a little bit there that we could take for other places. We're getting a little closer in aligning those with the true costs. What that means is we just have less room to move in the budget. So we really have to be kind of deliberate in where we take that additional money that we have. Prevention for the most part is kind of in line with where we expected. Again, we have not had the ability to support the Fire Safe Council just because of its relative non-existence at this point, so that is what it is. And hazmat is something that we generally receive from the county, so that's something that we coming in. Training, again, this budget is slightly low, but again, that's more a reflection of, one, it doesn't include the staff time for training, and we do plan, and once we take a look at redoing the budget as a whole, that's probably a category that needs to get pulled out of at least the part-time staff, so we see how much time we're actually dedicating to training our individuals. But the other factor of it is we are doing some classes in-house. On Wednesday, Captain Kaler and Chief Brooks are going to be putting on a class. Again, I'm kind of stepping on his toes. He's probably going to announce that. And we are bringing in organizations to help us with that. So Calorie is still supporting us pretty heavily on putting classes on at the district. And utilities, again, just keep bumping them up and they keep coming up at the same rate. So we're relatively on glide path with those. But again, what I would say is based off our ABA projections when we're looking at budgeting, we're gonna have to bring those kind of up to where they need to be. So the difficult thing for our budget is we truly don't get a good representation of where we close out the budgets till essentially we do our audits and then that comes back and we're almost a year behind on that at any given point in time. There's always been a good amount of space there that's relatively in the green, but as we start to close out these capital expenditures, as we bring on an additional person in the kind of our core services, we're going to lose some of that wiggle room moving forward if we choose to provide services at the level we are today, which again, from 14,000 hours to 24,000 hours is a almost a 30% increase of what we're trying to get out there and get done. Long term, it's likely not sustainable. We're gonna have to budget for not moving forward at that pace. Makes sense. We want to close out our capital expenditures and other things. Any questions on that part of the budget? Thank you, Hayes. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Sorry, I gotta run. I got one o'clock.
You got it.
Yeah, budgets.
Oh, I
They're
love
not as bad as
I love
Rob's.
budgets.
Yeah. So, and you know, when you talk about budget philosophy, I think that the town actually is in a great position. They are in a point when they're budgeting, they basically, for their TOT, they budget about, I'm guessing on this, Rob, correct me, but $17 million, which is a very conservative budget. And then they're probably going to come in at about 24 to 28. And then that gives them the flexibility as an organization to take care of those things that need to happen. Currently, it's housing. Our next need may be completely different, but you don't want to get in a position where your budget's so tight, you don't have the ability to jump on opportunities. And that's where I think we have to be careful to where we want to make sure we're putting enough money away so that as opportunities come up, we can take care of those without getting too constrained within our budget. I'd say we've been able to do that, but we also haven't been providing services at the level we'd like. As we increase those services, we need to make sure that we're not so tight that instead of buying a Honda generator, we buy something that is not going to know it. What would you knock on, Scott? Sears. Homelight? Yeah, Homelight.
Whatever they're selling over.
Homelight, right? So, you know, we've always been fortunate enough to kind of keep that relatively balanced, and I think that's going to be fundamental for moving forward. Again, page 61 just shows our second apportionment, 1.6 million. It puts us in a good spot. We were conservative with our budgeting, but as we're moving forward with these additional services, I think it kind of puts us right where we need to be. And then this actually worded kind of poorly, but item C on the budget, preliminary budget posting and adoption. This is just informational. So we have to adopt and post our budget based off certain criteria. Our preliminary budget will be, I get corrected by the two keepers of the exact facts here, will be in June. And that's basically when we post our preliminary budget. What we've done the last several years is because we have so little information, we put out a budget just purely based off the previous budget. And then we take the next 2-3 months to get to our final budget and tweak it and get it to what's a more better representation of where we believe we're going to end up. So our recommendation is we do that as well. This year, I want to add a little bit more. Beginning of the year, I put out a staff report on several funds that we should have and what those amounts in those funds should have been. Again, one of the concerns that we've heard in the past is because we have all of our money in one lump sum and people don't really have an idea of what that's being put towards. I put out some categories and what that looks like. We may tweak them a little. We're looking at potentially splitting out our capital expenditures so that we have equipment and apparatus in one and facilities in a separate one. And, I'm going to present to you in June, kind of some numbers that look at our cash flow over the year, kind of the lowest point being in January, what we feel we can put currently into those categories. Still a significant amount of work over the next few years. We really have to dial in our capital expenditures, both from, you're always right sizing and continuously adjusting your fleet for what it looks like for today as opposed to what it looked like 5 years ago. It's a combination of the organization as a whole as well as external factors on it. But that needs to occur, and then getting some realistic pricing, but also making sure that we have enough capital in there so we can seize on opportunities or necessities as they come up. So that's going to be a big portion of just looking at what our cash is doing today. And then recognizing we probably have an opportunity to put some things in that we may not, it's maybe kind of a one-time move, and then recognizing with the new budget, with the current staffing, how much can we put away on a regular basis? So intend to start that process with you next month, really with the long term of getting our finalized budget in the fall. Any questions or concerns on that?
One thing I would just say, I think, as we move toward the ballot measure, I think that we're probably going to see more public scrutiny of the budget than we might in the year when we're not going out and asking that.
We did last time.
Yeah, so I think we need to be really cognizant of that and really just, provide that extra documentation so that people don't just see that giant lump sum and think, I don't need me to vote for more money. And then the question, so if if we do move forward with the ballot measure and it does pass in November, I mean, when would we see those proceeds? I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but.
So let me answer the first question first. So I agree 100%, and that's where in June, I would like to have all of our funds broken out. So if somebody comes in and say, oh, you have $6 million, like, well, that's great. But because of our cash flow, we have $6 million today. We actually had $4 million in January, because again, we have to look at these 2 points that basically prop up our budget late in the year. So we really have to point them at kind of our lowest cash flow points. And then on top of that, again, we're not there from long term. What I like our capital expenditure, but remind them, a fire engine costs X amounts, and a ladder truck costs $1.8 million. That takes half of our reserve away. So, and my intent was to have that done in June so that if the board decides to move forward in July or at the latest beginning of August, if we do a special meeting with the ballot measure, that is all closed out. We have those answers available. I started, if you remember a few months ago, so we have our annual operating budget that's always been before the group. But we've had these other categories, and I basically created a capital expenditure budget. I'm gonna have to work with our CPA a little bit to adjust those on how they look. But we basically have kind of the ins and outs that are occurring that are not captured in the annual operating budget. So an example of that is, fortunately, there's expenses and revenues on that side as well. We purchased a Bobcat for about $150,000. That budget reflects the Bobcat. It also reflects the 75% match for CAL FIRE that helped pay for that. So this is a new process. I have it running for about 2 years, but it'll help explain that to the public and make sure that it's relatively transparent. And there's, it's kind of daylighting where our money is.
Chief, just a thought. It might be helpful in that capital replacement budget to identify, and you may have this already done, specific items and like what you're building to. So when someone says, gee, you've got $3 million reserve. Well, yeah, so we're building toward having to replace the ladder truck in 2030, and we're X number of dollars on the way to whatever it is.
Yep. And so it's a great question. And I was considering to bring this to the board next month. That list actually does exist. It's the reality is just at today's costs, it's going to extenuate the fact that we need more funds in there. And again, when I told you that 3391 is supposed to get replaced in 2027 for $50,000, that's at the top of my head.
Right.
That exists in that Excel sheet. There's a couple concerns with, and that's where we need to bring that number up. doing that right is a long process. You really have to do, you don't just look at 91 and how much does it cost? That's the easy part of it, because like I said, someone will be like, oh yeah, it's $110,000. You have to come in and say, okay, what is the district trying to accomplish? What does the right fleet look like? And then how much does that cost? And within the constraints, and it's kind of going in both directions, right? People are saying, well, how much do you want for the ballot measures? Like there is no answer. You're triangulating from both sides. If it was up to me, I would say I would vote for 250. The reality is I know that that is not a reasonable number that we're going to get the public to get to. So it's a little bit of what can the public bring and what does the district need? And that, from that perspective, got us to the number of 97. Similarly, in the capital expenditures, I have to look at what can we reasonably bring in as a district? And it's incredibly hard here because it's not just our culture, but it's also the perception. If you look at the station, I believe we ran it recently, and I want to say it's about $35 million to build a station. We could not build it today. Our apparatus are in the same boat. That is a combination of a couple of things. The ridiculous inflation we've seen over the last couple of years, but also because a lot of the capital purchases made by the district were made in a time that we were incredibly personnel short. And, this place was run by 4 chief officers and a bunch of volunteers, which is fantastic. And the reality is, as this town has changed, we have had to bring more people on to help support services, but we haven't been able to keep up with these purchases. I guarantee we would not build a station like this today. In some ways, Chief Freevault says it's one of the hardest things because the public doesn't understand some of our difficulties because it looks like we're doing really well. I think we're balancing and managing things, but ultimately, so you're fighting that perception. You're also fighting culture, right? I would make the argument, I hate to say it, but 91 should maybe be replaced by an F-150 with a couple, a shell with some camper or cargo things like we have on 97, which is out of Station 2. It'll be cheaper, and for the majority of the work, it'll do its job. The difficult thing is, again, you have what we have today, which, don't get me wrong, I love our old 91. We have our budget constraints, and so it's probably a 6-month staff intense process to really take a look at, what can we afford as a district and how do we get to something that's reasonable? The other thing that's unfortunate is the way that schedule is built out, it had the station built into it. So when we finished the payments on the station, the intent back then was that amount would stay in for capital expenditures, which we didn't do. We still have funds every single year. We end up relatively in the green. But at this point, those funds are going to have to be committed long-term. So the Excel sheet exists. You look at it, you can say, this is not reflective of where we are. I would just say to get to something that's reflective of where we are, you need Excel skills, but you also need to work through some culture. You need to work some balancing, and we do need to get there. It's going to take a little bit of work. And that's where I think, right now I took a stab at this off just some general numbers of what I thought was reasonable, which is where I came up with the 10% being a good number. The other nice thing about 10% is it goes up as your budget goes up. A lot of your budget's going up. So it's a better number than 250, in my opinion. Chief Brooks, just, he has time on his hands. He was doing a similar parallel calculation, just being Chief Brooks, and we came up with a very similar number. So I feel that at the point where we are today is, let's commit roughly what we think we're going to need there, and then we'll get it dialed. We do need to get it down. I think that there's importance for that, for the public to trust us, but as
Well,
far as,
and that's really, I'm not looking for the precise answer.
Yep.
I'm just saying, if somebody, catches you on the street and says,
Yeah.
why do you guys need, so this is the Steve, what's his name? Shank or whoever it was who campaigned so hard against the
Sure.
last thing was,
Yeah.
well, you got $5 million in the bank.
sure.
You don't need,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what we can do is bring you kind of the current Excel sheet, give you an idea, and the easiest one is frankly the ladder truck. I mean, Chief Walker can probably pull you a number. He can call Pierce tomorrow and say, what would an equivalent ladder truck cost today? He could probably tell you it's about 1.8 million. You can have that, higher as something for comparable.
Right.
The reality is, the next ladder truck, and maybe it'll be exactly the same, but maybe, Chief Freevault made the call, maybe we don't have 2. Those are some very difficult operational decisions that we have to make to figure out how to right size the fleet kind of for our current economics and representation of services and personnel costs. So,
Makes sense. Any questions on that?
No, I echo the same comment. I think that the perception is the fire district is a fire department funded by the town, and it's a political thing. It's not a political thing. It's a district. It's funded by a portion of property taxes, which is shrinking. But the costs have been increasing as everybody's cost. Insurance alone how much does that suck from the budget from the last increase? And then you have personnel that isn't just personnel, which are, and I hate it when well, you have all these volunteers. Well, wait a minute. Why don't you volunteer then? Volunteers cost money because they need training. And then you have, in addition to the urban protection, you have a wildfire need. We live on the edge of a forest. So I think those are salient points that I believe are lost on the average individual.
and that's frankly, one of the things I struggle most with is how to tell our story for this upcoming ballot
I
measure,
agree.
because there's two trains of thoughts. One is this is an incredibly nuanced and complicated conversation and discussion, which, and I'll tell you what my current strategy on it is. And I think that's very valid. I would say for the public, what they're receiving here, I mean, frankly, most people tell you, once they know that we're a district, we actually prefer that you're not part of the town. We want you working separately for public safety. And, there are reasons that we exist as a fire protection district. They're very valid, and that's why they exist. This isn't by happen chance that this is where we're sitting today. The flip side is we sit down with, the consultants that are assisting us with this process. They go, no, you're going to confuse the heck out of people. You really have to say, we're going to improve response, and you not get into the details of how you're doing that because you're going to lose them. I'm kind of taking the stance that it's both, and that I have to tailor my message based off the audience. I will say that they're probably right in the sense that, we think about the people that read the sheet, and they've probably made up their mind on every single issue for or against already, right? And those are the ones that I'd be sitting down with Tom Cage and making an argument for why I believe that this is the most fiscally efficient and prudent way, an effective way to provide government, and why they should support us. It's probably not the right argument to make for that middle 30% that hasn't made up their mind yet. It's not as, up to speed as Tom Cage may be. So my intent is, I'm speaking in front of general groups, I will be following the script of, we are going to be improving services. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. I'm sitting down with someone who's been local for 20 years and understands, and I will try to get to that point of explaining to them, why we believe this is the best system. The current stresses on it that are primarily tied to things like you mentioned, tourism, but the reality remains there is no mechanism for us to go after TOT funding. That is not an option. It gets brought up all the time. So you have to make the difficult choice as a taxpayer if you want to fund these services further, doing it through a ballot tax measure. For the general public, I think that might be too nuanced of a conversation, and really leading them back to what's kind of our next upcoming thing. What are we trying to do? We're trying to improve that one response, but on the, medical. We don't think of ourselves as medically, no, it's 60% of what we do.
I think that's important to mention.
Yeah,
I really
and
do.
absolutely. But it can get lost on us because it's just another call for us, and we really think about these more complex fire ones and that sort of thing. So, a little bit of this is important for kind of how you speak with the public as well. And I do think that it's going to depend on who your audience is. I think that a lot of times you just keep it relatively simple. If you're speaking with somebody who has similar understanding of the history, the complexity, we don't get to choose how the levers of government work. We are a cog in that system, and we have certain things that we can do, and we'll do them to the best of our ability. And we believe that them supporting services is in their best interest. That being said, John already can't give me $1 million. Doesn't work that way, So it's that those are two separate issues from our perspective.
All right.
That answer.
Speaking of that, you want to go right into old business? In terms of the potential ballot measure?
Sure, Commissioner Truax, do you want to start on this?
Sure. So as you know, we have been meeting with the consultants with props and measures every other week. They have developed some of this collateral for us. I'm sure that you all have received your mailer. And we've also, they've also been kind of executing some sponsored social media posts, the comments on which have been very interesting. We can talk about that more in a minute. But these are, these are basically kind of the framework of things. We worked really closely with them on the language. Like the Chief said, it's, they want to really keep things general. I think we tend to want to dig in a little more, and a lot is going to depend on audience. So these different kind of pieces, there's, you've got um, the piece on reducing the risk of wildfires and natural disasters. Then there's this FAQ sheet about the potential partial tax. We worked really closely with them on the language on that. And so we're just continuing to roll those out as the surveys come in. Those get tabulated. If people drop them off or mail them in, Caroline is actually entering them into the system so that they're all kind of automatically tabulated in the Excel spreadsheet where people have, have the option to rank, what services they prioritize. And then in addition to these frameworks, there's also a framework for a PowerPoint. And so we're starting really a public outreach process that will include the chief making presentation to town council. Some of us may go to, other groups like Lions. And so we need to work through those things. So that's kind of where we are right now. And then I think we decided that we'll have a meeting in July to deliberate on whether or not to bring the ballot measure forward with the option to bring that back in August if we don't decide to go forward then, but we can't go any later than August in order to get on the ballot. So.
Yes.
I have a question on the collateral. We tend to use MLFPD and MLFD interchangeably. Or interchangeably. And I'm wondering if there isn't a place somewhere, I know we put this together, but to explain what the difference of those two are. Because, I mean, if I go to the bottom, the fourth point, how does FPD plan to address the current challenges? The Mammoth Lakes Fire Department is equipped to respond, to ensure that the departments. So there's that and some of the other stuff is just sort of interspersed. I think on most people, the subtlety is lost.
Yep.
But
So, great question.
there is a big difference.
100%. We've had this discussion. We had in the last ballot measure. We were having it today. So there's a couple things that were considered when this was written the way that it was. One, and this one's pretty critical, is last time we wrote the ballot measure question kind of interesting. And there's a lot of nuance into how you write that question, the psychology of how people read, and then how everything else should kind of work backwards from that. The other part I didn't understand is how much the polling that we did is influencing the decision making. So there's probably, I don't intend to go for this again, but polling is critical and the ballot question is critical. In the ballot question, it has to have our specific name, Mammoth Lakes Fire Protection District, because that is our name. There's a whole bunch of other requirements that people can probably, on how that question is written. So we have to work within those constraints and then kind of work backwards on how we explain this. Due to the fact that in that ballot measure, it has to say MLFPD, Mammoth Lakes Fire Protection District, and we always had doing business as Mammoth Lakes Fire Department, and then there's the other factors as well. People assume you're part of the town and you should get money that way. It was decided that honestly, just blurring it together right now is probably the cleanest thing that we can do for the short period we have of time. In order so that when people are voting, they're not confused that, oh, I might be voting for someone else. So that is kind of the approach which was taken. Now, long term, I kind of feel like building the plane as we fly it, and that's the nature of it. I will tell you, like first thing that I should do as an administrator is figure out what her name is, but I'm like, that's not an easy thing. Then take a look at our mission statement and see if it truly represents what it is, and to make sure our services are being tied to that, and then all of our programs are tied to that. So we will get there, but we are trying to fly and keep this thing going where it is. But these are very important questions because our sign out front says Mammoth Lakes Fire Department. Spots wearing hat that says the same thing. We are going to go to the measure as protection district. And today, that's probably the cleanest path. There is no wetlands from, so we can decide where it goes, but it's very valid strategy at this time.
Yeah, I was just trying to get my head around. Because the Mammoth Lakes Fire Department sounds like it's a town thing.
Yes.
Fire Protection District sounds like it could be. Not just. a town,
Yes,
you know,
and
so-
some people would argue that you are also just an educated voter who knows the difference, and most people couldn't tell you the difference between a protection, and they might see the PD as representing the police department. So, sometimes I do get in this where I think like our fire chief and the consultants remind us, okay, think like Mrs. Smith voter. We had this nuanced discussion, and the direction is, yes, they actually kind of included both of them in there intentionally, pushing towards fire protection district because that's ultimately what's going to show up on the ballot.
Good to understand that. Thank you.
So a couple things just to kind of dovetail off Commissioner Truax's comments. Yes, I've started booking basically my educational outreach. That's going to be June and July. I have a limited window here where I can go to the public. I can't advocate for this. I think I have a responsibility to tell them this is what you have for services, this is what you do not have, and make a decision moving forward on if I can choose. So truly kind of educating the public on, what the district has. There is a point at which that stops, and that's ultimately, when the board decides yes or no, we're going to move forward with this. Technically, truly going to correct me, the latest date we can do is 88 days before the day of the election, which would put us sometime at the beginning of August. We don't have a special meeting. We would have to hold that in July, which would be ideal if you don't want to come in for another meeting. But it does close that window because, again, once we take action, limits my abilities to some extent. So I'm really working to schedule everything in June and July to get in front of groups and really explain what it is we're considering doing. Like Commissioner Truax mentioned, it's already scheduled for town council. I've reached out to Lions, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce. I want to get in front of, there's a lunch club that I've been told I should sit down with and have some lunch with.
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays,
Right now.
The
Very
reality is,
exclusive. It's hard to get into.
some of those people may have already made up their minds, and that's where, again, I do have to make sure that, we kind of work through the different groups. But, these are, and Caroline can make copies for all of you to hand out. I also say that the ones that we had folded up for people to vote are nice because they include a little QR code. It's important that people feel like they're part of the discussion, and they actually are. I have people that are writing back. Somebody was asking about Tyrell Lane. I looked into that project and I have to get back to that individual. They're giving us feedback on, where they feel like they should get services. People feel like they have a voice. They're more likely to be interested in something and concerned about it. So that's really important. And to the extent that you can, those are things that you can hand out and explain. Yeah, Bedford. So at Caroline's desk, we have those up front. Once the board makes a decision on it, if it chooses to move forward, there would have to be a group that would then take the lead and carry this forward. The nice thing is, I do feel like we are in a position of more support than we may have been in previous ones. The Fire Chiefs Association is by far the most important voice on this. If you don't have the support of firefighters, don't bother. They're supporting it both with time in theory, and they've already have a financial pledge to it. So we're in a good position there. We also have external groups such as, it's the first time that we have true outreach from town council as far as what can we do to help you get this out, because they recognize that us being successful helps them be successful. So
We had some offers from certain members of the council, and we taken them up on those.
yeah, so there's a couple things that have to happen. The most vocal is probably John Wentworth. He's still keeping up with the committee, but he's less involved than he was on the front end. Once we get to the point of where there's people advocating, he may get more involved again. Ultimately, we've kept him in the conversation. There was a discussion at town council where they may decide to move forward with an ordinance, or not an ordinance, a resolution of support. So I would expect that would come either after my speech, to I'll be sitting down in front of them on July 3rd. So I'll assume that if they choose to move in that direction, they would do it either on July 3rd or as people decide July 3rd, let's do it at our next meeting and have that drafted up on their side. So there has been general support, yes.
Two things. One, with regard to town council, you know, a lot of people but attend those town council meetings. And also, well, I know a lot of people who watch them on. Would that be possible for the town council to speak to this and their support of it and why it's necessary with some points that have been, they've been helped.
Pre-scripted.
Huh?
Pre-supported.
Pre-supported.
Yeah,
But-
absolutely.
Second one is, it's a different topic, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, it's getting late, but aren't there some things, you know, in terms of equipment that you're required, we are required as a fire district to replace with certain, can't keep fixing an engine. Don't you at some point have to, isn't it mandated by either state or regular, some more form of regulation, do you have to
It's
replace it?
incredibly difficult because we have so many mandates, frankly, that we're not keeping up on the training side, from the equipment side, from any side to, someone can always tell us that, and they would be correct. My job is to try to balance all these liabilities that we hold and try to pick a path forward that keeps us going through in a reasonable manner. I agree. I think that one of the concerns is if you look at, again, kind of the polling, people put equipment as low down in their list of things. Now, I recognize, and the beauty of this is, you know, I need to, at the end of the day, figure out how to make every piece of that is reasonable equipment. So we will make that happen, but from asking the public to support us and what they're really looking at, and these, you look at page 62, the way that they're listed is actually kind of in the support that they had from the public. So providing rapid 911 emergency medical response is the number one thing that people care about. And at the bottom of the list were communication systems, coordinating local emergencies, and essential equipment and protective gear. So people know you need engines, they know you need radios, but ultimately what they're saying is they want.
I'm stretching this
No, I
analogy.
didn't know it.
Sure.
But, you know, there was a point in time where a young captain pretty much got AWOL or busted because he questioned Rumsfeld on the fact that our equipment isn't equipped to withstand an IED. And then, you know, Rumsfeld, well, you go to war with what you have. Well, since then, many improvements have been made to that equipment. You send people into harm with inadequate equipment, and that's what this is saying.
I was.
We're
That's
okay
what
with
I was
seeing-
trying to get at in a different angle with this. Okay, so
We're sending you.
we
into-
know that in the next 10 years, we've got $10 million.
So I will give you the easiest one that is kind of the golden standard for a fire. Okay, there's this rule under NFPA is called 2 in, 2 out. The 2 in, 2 out rule states specifically that if you wish to enter an IDLH environment, an environment where there's a life hazard, so basically if I went in without a mask, I would die.
Yeah.
You need 2 people on the outside and 2 people on the inside. And we get there eventually. We bring people in, right? But on any given day, there is a delay on how quickly we can do that. We have to balance it against the fact that another NFPA rule says you need about 14 to 16 people on a structure fire. So if I take 26,000 hours, divide that by 3,000, which is what a full-time firefighter works, I can get 8 firefighters. I can split that into 3 groups, 2, 2, 2. So I have to find a way to do both. I need to make my part-time staff feel comfortable that we're going to keep them here, and also provide for having a quick response with enough people. The quick response that you need a couple people, 2 in, 2 out. Technically, that's not supposed to include the driver operator or the engineer. They have to keep operating. It's not supposed to include. So you kind of almost are supposed to have 6 if you're trying to follow NFPA. On Monday mornings, we have engineer Jason Compton here. That's it. Okay, so if you want to talk about where are we short, I'd actually say we have more fire engines than anything else. I think we do need some more people. But again, you have to be incredibly careful with that messaging because the last time we went there, the concern was you want to bring on 4 people and forget about the rest of us. That is 100% not my intent. I think that We are also short on quite a few things that just need to be done to keep the place up to speed there, what we call our administrative duties and training and keeping up the fleet. So we need a couple people here. From the messaging side, what truly makes sense to the public is we'd like to get 4 firefighters to you incredibly quickly. It's true. We just have to, as a board, understand that we have to have the trust of our group that yes, we'd like to have those people on the engine, and there's always going to be a need for the rest of you as well, because
We still do have that trust of the association. Right?
we have it, yes. But again, that's where I spend the time to,
Okay,
make
because
sure
we
we.
did it so much last time, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, that's what I mean. It wasn't unanimous, yeah. Okay,
And ultimately, the place where I would say we have the most kind of synergy right now is Wildland. You look at a place that I'm going to have to cut because there's no other way without keeping our core services. It's our Wildland program today. We are running our Wildland program at a deficit. We have, in order to provide services, which the Forest Service has this year pulled out their engine and their water tender. There is no Forest Service present here. They're up at Crestview and down at Rock Creek. We need to have a solid wildland. And to do that long-term, that requires a funding base. We're still gonna work on grants. We're still gonna work on sending them out of district for assignments. But there needs to be some foundation within our budget that accounts for that. And, that is one that is not but there's no negatives to that if you're looking at it from a part-time perspective or a full-time perspective. It's mostly seasonal work, so a lot of them have opportunities. It's providing services for the community. So that is one. There is no, are we meeting our mandates on wildland? Sure. Are we significantly at risk with wildland? Absolutely, especially due to the fact that we're on an island here essentially, where our closest neighbors are a couple of volunteer departments. They're good departments, but it will be 7 to 9 hours before the cavalry shows up essentially.
Hey, Alan, what is the percentage of the property tax that the fire district gets?
Good question. We're just looking at it. It's not there's different numbers for different pieces. So depending, your house may be on a different account than somebody else's house based off, you may not have a mosquito abatement district. That may not be exactly correct, but to a certain extent, it's not all exactly the same, but it's roughly 7%. So between
7%, is that what you said?
of the tax that gets collected. Okay. So if you pay $1,000, $70 should be going towards investment.
I had understood that it was like 1% or a half.
So it's complicated, but basically, your taxes are 1% by Prop 13. You can only collect 1% of the value of your property. There's some additional things that can get added on if the voters elect to do that. That then gets broken out by all the organizations that are providing services. Those things got settled a long time ago. Sometimes they come up for reconsideration. An example of that is out of Snow Creek. There was some confusion there on who's providing services and who should be receiving a portion of that. So generally those organizations and legal may have a better way of explaining how this occurs, but they get together and there is a decision made on how the property tax, that 1% is going to get broken up to those groups. But ultimately, that's not a place where we can most likely do any negotiating. It's that is a set thing. The county is very dependent on the portion they receive. The water district is dependent on their piece. And generally organizations aren't going to come in and hand over a piece of because they all have services they need to provide. So.
Any other questions or comments on the update?
I just want to go back really quick to the question about council members and endorsing this, because I think when you spoke at a council meeting a few months ago and they were all like rah on board, and the town attorney was like, okay, that's great, but time out. Because they have some constraints around what how they can advocate as well. So I think if we can get them to do to do a resolution, and if they can approve that concurrently with your presentation, I think that would probably be the ideal. So, and, hopefully you can also work into the presentation for the benefit of the public that no, the district is not eligible to be a recipient of TOT. We're not obviously a department of the town, but, people don't know that. So.
And I do appreciate that the town council meetings are a venue just to get up, as I was reminded by Chief Jeff Adams when he came up with Cal, yes, I may work for this board, but I'm ultimately everybody's fire chief in town. So I am their fire chief. And I do, anytime there's an item that's relevant to our mission or just public safety in general, I'm up there supporting it. We're just speaking on tracking people through town. The police chief is going to have an item coming up that I'm going to be up there supporting because it also has implications on evacuation. So it is important for me to attend those, and to a certain extent, the county ones as well. Ultimately, the fire districts, we are still the best staff, most resource rich district out of all of us. I was at a fire chief's meeting about a month ago, and Bevining Fire requested assistance from the general fund that we have as fire chiefs to help replace basically an engine block for $20,000. It's kind of looking at it. So I went back and looked at their ABA projections. Their annual budget is $38,000. So some of these, we still are the large Goliath in that group. And we have a responsibility to make sure that public safety, especially fire issues, are brought before the whole community. Sometimes you can get a different message when you're considered mammoth, but it is important that we keep pushing that forward.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Old business. New business, consideration, submit nomination for Chief Such, serve as the designated sacrifice for NAPCO program place.
So
Is that what that said?
continuing this theme of public service, I was approached by a member of LAFCO, and I had received this letter. And ultimately, there's a couple things that are occurring on LAFCO. Paul McFarland, who was on LAFCO, and I don't have their current, the website doesn't show who the current membership is, but my understanding is because he is going to be a county commissioner, he can no longer serve under his previous position where he was serving as a water district member. He was serving as a water district member, but he's also very active with his fire district out there. We also lost, Hank used to be on the LAFCO for a long time out of Long Valley. So there is this general feeling that the LAFCO is just missing that public safety fire district representation. There was an ask to see if we could make ourselves available to sit in and support that. It's not so much a political position. They're really looking for somebody who can take a look at all issues dealing with formation of districts. So it's not specifically fire related, sometimes water districts, sometimes you're dealing with other items, but who can kind of provide an analysis and has that background in the fire service. Jeff Such, when I spoke to him, was incredibly excited. I do believe, again, this is one of those areas that we, as tough as we are on kind of staffing, that we should be supporting. Obviously, anything that's dealing with our district, he is conflicted out of, but we should still move that forward. And so, yes, I would.
Always important to have a nose inside the tent. I think you do a great job. Set that designated sacrifice. It's facetious. Probably missed a meeting when you were down. So do we need a vote on this?
So
Or is this just a?
this does require action. I'll let legal.
Yeah, we are taking action.
Okay.
I think you can just go ahead and provide direction.
Okay. So is everybody in support of the nomination of Chief Such?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Jeff is.
Yeah.
Jeff
As long
doesn't
as
get
Jeff
a
is
vote.
willing.
Oh, yeah. I can see it. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I support it.
Overrated.
That's my
Okay.
came back.
So I move that we, submit his name.
Sure.
Okay. I do so.
I'll second.
I thought we just needed board direction.
Okay,
We needed-
okay, so good.
Okay, so,
You've been directed to,
sorry,
be
I'm
nominating
we're
Jeff.
going backwards now. Who made the motion?
Roger, right?
And the second?
That's you.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we? Commissioner Curry, what is your vote?
All right.
Commissioner Easterby, what is your vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Mendel, what is your vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Truax, what is your vote?
Yes.
All right, this motion carries 4-0. Congratulations, Jeff.
Good luck.
Strike that. Okay, staff reports, chief officer reports. I see none here, which will move us right into fire chief reports.
So this is just kind of our standing update on the cell tower at Fire Station 2. Chief Walker is going to be working to kind of prepare the facility as far as removing the current chair tower that we have there so that the project can begin. My understanding is AT&T/UConn is working through a permitting process. I will note that I was just served today. There is a newly formulated LLC that is arguing the decision primarily of town council to support the planning and economic development decision, but we are named in it as well. At this point, I don't have anything to provide other than that. Other than, this is something we expected, frankly, and ultimately AT&T has it in its best interest to work to move this forward. I'm going to be working with our legal counsel to figure out the best steps for us. We attempted to not put too much on our general counsel in the sense that, really here to support us in general actions such as Brown Act, that sort of thing. And this is really a potentially specialized need. So they might be advising us on kind of different options we can take, but ultimately it's not within our contract if the district is dealing with a lawsuit to use our general counsel. So we will be working with other parties through that process. Don't know if it's worth getting into much more discussion on it. Other than that, I will say that if there is a need for closed sessions, we can have those under certain parameters. And we're essentially working with legal to make sure we take appropriate steps.
Right, exactly. Basically, we can have a closed session, and if you guys want to meet sooner, we could call a special meeting to do that. But I think, I'll work with the chief and sort of figure out what next steps are, and then we can go from there.
All right. Chief Morrow.
So this one was listed under me, but Chief Morrow is officially still deploying, although she has, warned me that up till June 2nd, never know really what's going to occur. But her trying to support all of her trainings, and her intent is to be, I think Thursday's actually your last.
Thursday will be my last minute. Grant vacation, then I report to duty May 30th. Deployment ceremony June 1st. We report to corrective officers June 2nd. We go through a whole new scrub again on our admin and medical stuff. We'll be there for 3 weeks, so we had on those pending any issues that we encounter when we're out there. I just want to thank the district for supporting my military endeavors. Been in the military for 24 years, so this is the second. So these are probably my last deployment before I retire. And I appreciate being able to still stay involved with the department while I'm in overseas. I just think it's critical, especially in the permitting and inspection side, to be involved and maintain consistency for the public. So I appreciate still staying.
Yeah, so and I guess to kind of echo that, first of all, wish you luck, and thank you for your service. We were extremely fortunate this time because Chief Morrow's position is incredibly hard to fill. All the division chiefs have this strange divergence in the job where you have to be crazy enough to run into fire buildings and you are a emergency chief officer. You also have significant administrative responsibilities on the non-emergency side, and that's probably the most relevant. You're overseeing prevention. We are fortunate for two reasons. One is Chief Morrow has agreed to kind of support us through this process while she's out. Additionally, we hired kind of with a relatively open job description, not knowing how much interest we would be able to bring in. We were very fortunate because quite a few people stepped up and worked to support the district. It's actually going to lead to two separate actions. The first one is we had so many people, especially on the emergency operations side, that wanted to support us. We want to an opportunity to build out that program. Look at, we've had a very strong firefighter academy. Our driver operator program has passed all the mandates of the state bar marshals. We started looking at our company and chief officer. We just haven't grown as an organization to those levels. When I started, you got a red helmet with a handshake. There's still something to be said for that because a large portion of that job is the experience, and I'm not going to deny that. But there's also training components. So we now have a large group that we're going to sit down and work with in the next year to take this opportunity to really work with our company and chief officers, build out that portion of the district. The other part of it is we had Captain Mike McCarthy apply for the position. He is a uniquely qualified individual just because of his experience in code and regulation. He wrote quite a bit of that we have had. We had quite a bit of input through this process, making sure that the building department was part of this, and we are excited to have him on. I think he's going to be a great addition to the team. So we were very blessed with Chief Morrow being able to support us and being able to bring in a candidate that can frankly meet both sides of the house very well is a little bit of luck, honestly. He's going to have the same struggle that I foresee for most of our employees here, which is he's trying to figure out where to live. He out of town and now he's back. He's back full time starting June 10th. But it is a challenge for all of our employees. So excited for Chief Morrow. Can't wait to have her back. But the good news is we should be in good shape over the course of this next year.
On behalf of the board, thank you for your service and thank you for your service to Map Flood Department. Your continued service.
Absolutely. And if there's any personnel problems that you have or anything like that, you might be able to find a way to send Tyson over there.
That's right.
Some already know the contest.
There's the veto.
And then the last item on the wildland program.
Yeah, so we hired 8 folks, 5 of them are returned last year, which is great.
Technically 9, Chief Brooks is 9.
That's right.
Their full start date, I think it's May 28th, though we've already been attending training and doing some work. They went out to the Citizen Forest Service because the chief mentioned they're short on their RX plan out there through late. So we went up with that. They camped by Sierra to finish up with the fuels reduction project. So like quite hard. They'll be working at Station 2 again. So they're really close to Roger. So but right across the street. We're going to start to 8 of them out together. We're going to break them into 2 groups. We have a supervisor trainee this year, which is Vito. I'm pretty excited about that. He doesn't have the experience that he needs for that spot. So we're kind of working around that with our more experienced folks. So he'll have one of the crews. We're going to start with keeping the currents, just working regular 410s like we did last year, to get them up to speed, see how our team things work. And then we'll be switching them to we can talk about that. Where we'll go to one crew on for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and crew on. And then Wednesdays are overlap days, so they can get some bonding, some training together. So it gives us 7-day coverage, 10 hours per day. Part of that is that they are available for local response on wildfires. She said, don't have to posters. So along with first outage in 31, then here's one. Here and then obviously they're also available. Instant response outside of the area. Also mentioned books, already been in training, we still have more training to go. Before we really get started back, starting on the 28th, but half the crew is in another class of training, so the other half will be out with the project running. Started some projects early. We did an education event out at Bonds. We plan to do some more of those. We think the Youth Center might be the next great place to do that. We've also got Kids and Blues coming up. We do another 4th of July in-house, all based on prevention type education. We're planning for next week, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, weather, ground conditions, to build to try and burn the rest of the piles we have left to go. There's 150 piles left last year, so we may not get them all, but we also agreed to White Park with one of their grants, which they got, correct? $6 million grant. We're going to take some of the money from our CAL FIRE grant that we had earmarked for SQL work. And we haven't had to do the kind of SQL work we thought we were going to have to actually do what they call notice of exemptions, which the state allows and CAL FIRE allows. And I usually do those for most of our, so we said we take some of that money, CAL FIRE, and we'll be doing their SQL contract work, not us. Pay for that grant, so, and then along with that, we end up with 3 non-federal parcels, right?
Yeah, correct. So the entirety of that grant that the White Bark put in for is doing work that's kind of along Chair 15 to Canyon, both on the ski areas, kind of along the road there, and you said Lake Mary. And they also are picking out a couple of target hazards. So primarily, the land between the hospital and including the hospital and the schools, that piece there. And then also really White Bark is kind of our primary target hazard. That is not, it's not one treatment, that's years and years of treatments. Ideally, we get to a point where 5 years from now, we can do some broadcast burning to where we've thinned it out enough to where you can actually return fire to that landscape to keep it out there. But you cannot do that safely today. So a portion of that SEGO work would include work in the Valentine, and then there are certain pieces where we are just a better operation crew than bringing in contractors. There's essentially lumberjacks come in and do a lot of the work that's occurring, but there's some kind of more fine-tuned work, fuels work that has to happen on Creek and Valentine, which may be a good fit for our crew. So a couple of good opportunities. Again, what kind of looks right with White Bark is one of their members that just reached out to myself and Chief Grove about some smaller projects. There are $20,000-$30,000 projects that they've got. Maybe our crew would be a good fit for it. I think there's some good synergy there where ultimately, we're not going to turn to doing full lumberjacks, but this is a crew that, we don't want to be sitting here waiting for a fire. They want to be doing mitigation work within the community. That's kind of what it looks right. And they're off to a great start already. So.
And then we also have, we've got a couple of things. One is they call it MOPS, which is the use pathways. We want to use those as a fuel break by part of cap. We still need to do some exploring, we do some testing, we use pathways with miles, so it could be a helpful piece for us, which require. And then the other one, which we've got to do some exploring on, how to do this, is getting the fuels approved to a point where we work out a system, we can help individual parcel owners with their fuel reduction projects. We have our folks who specialize in these, and those we have tools to get done, such as limbing up, drop small trees. We won't get into larger ones, but the problem is trying to figure out how do we approach doing private parcels. Obviously, the easy part is to say, look, go with low income folks first, but the feeling is there's probably not a significant amount of those. So we have to look at some other avenues to make it fair. So if I get your house, Roger might go, how come you're not doing my house? So we're looking at some of them maybe in form of working with fire advice communities, if they start actually building in some of these neighborhoods. We go in and do, you know, after the community barbecue, some education, maybe guys, hey, do I just go and do an assessment of what things should get improved? Then maybe we do some parcels in there that kind of do everybody else think what right might look like, some private favorite work. And there are certain ones, you know, like Alexander Street's, when we put a bunch of folks, you talk about a particular parcel that needs work, and we go into it. Take care of that one, it's in your minds, the greatest threat in the area. So that's something we just have to work on, but we got a lot of projects, but the chief is giving us that direction. It's how do we get down to individual? Because most of our land is made up of these individual parcels, forces, that most of it. So how do we make that work? We're also working with the town keeps coming back to us and asking if we can help. They're using something we're together. Sheet grass area, spots like area, bed, standing there. So interesting. So last year we did a post that we did all class. Scott was able to help us going out and getting some of the guidance as they did the first sets of drop-ins, and then this year we're going to get a couple of folks up to the second level so they can be supervisors amongst the rest of them. So I think everybody's excited. They're also hoping that they get a little more experience with fires outside the area. See how it works. But that ends up being a couple of sword fires, you'll have to work. So, but we are for the grant, the current CAL FIRE grant, handling that work on. We are well ahead of what our original acreage was, what we had to do. So chipping last year accounted for, well, we did 550 parcels did last year. And we're calculating, you know, roughly half acre for each one was based on formulas. So that's the equivalent of an acreage. Apply for so that's all right. I start spending. We're about 60%, so we're right on the schedule. That grant will end in March of 2025.
Right. Well, when the Forest Service went in and cleaned up the forest floor there with the fires last year. And it's noticeable that a lot of the trees got were they just singed and they'll come back, or did you lose all those?
Well, if you look at the ones that burned out at Smoky Flats, you've seen those.
No.
Some of those won't make it. They just got too much heat in them, and that was because the ground fuel ended up being heavier than they thought. Yeah. And so in those areas where you see that, it just depends. Some of the tree types like fire, and they're just going to release pine cones and start some big growth with pines. Other ones probably got too much heat. So it's sad to see how that wasn't the plan. Just kind of happened. So it shows us how far we got on that activity.
All right. Board member comments? Any?
I just wanted to say what a great job everybody did at the Touchy Truck event. It was really, really great. I think everybody really enjoyed seeing the ladder truck out there. And Caroline said we have her take some photos. So that was fun.
Association comments? Okay. Announcements. Administrative business. What is that? Brown Act.
So if it would please the board, I could do a presentation at the next board meeting or, you know, a future board meeting, just sort of a review of the Brown Act, to make sure we're all on the same page. Not necessary, but it's an option if you're interested.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Chief, why don't we look at agendas as we have a light agenda as we come up to, I mean, July may or may not be the appropriate time, but certainly it's not a bad thing. Just remind ourselves.
Okay, great.
Oh, sure the bit. Meeting schedules. I think you should change it to alleviate conflict because you have to, I mean, it's an issue.
Yeah, so I mean, the less significant, it's great for me to be available. I do occasionally attend the county board meetings. Ultimately, with our new legal being provided by general counsel for the county, it's a significant issue from their side. We had Tuesdays for a long period of time. We try to look to see if there would be any negative impacts, and there may be some times which, for example, in December, that would be coming up between Christmas and New Year, we tend to cancel that meeting anyways.
So I guess I would ask, also for members of the board, are there days that are non-starter?
And just to provide a little perspective, the county meets on the first, second, and third Tuesday of the month. So a natural transition would maybe be the fourth
Tuesday.
third Tuesday of the month. Don't know how that would work.
Is that great?
Or alternatively, I mean, if you guys want to keep it the third week of the month, assuming that works for the chief as well, you know, that's fine for me. We would just move it a day. We'd move it to like Wednesday, or we'd move it to Monday, or instead of Tuesday.
Is there anything financially or anything else that the third week works better than the fourth week or the second week or?
I was looking through kind of our past agenda items, and there's nothing that jumps out. I mean, I'm sure there is. I always
Yeah, I
forget
know.
something.
There's always gonna be
Um,
something.
But ultimately, if there's nothing that sets this in stone forever, other than I do think that there is so much change that having something consistent is important for organizations. So, for me, from that perspective, keeping it on Tuesdays kind of looks right.
Okay.
My answer.
Does it alleviate it if we have a meeting earlier?
Or we just get together and talk.
One of the thoughts.
That's the
on-
ground.
Our training.
And great, one of the thoughts on previous boards has been ultimately, we serve the people. So the thought was by being available at lunch, people can come in from their jobs or whatever, how thought versus actuality. I mean, we generally don't get much turnout. So I don't know if that would truly impact our turnout. You may lose your lunch if you decide to have a morning meeting.
Or second breakfast. yeah.
Second breakfast, that's right.
That would be a long day though for you two.
Yeah.
To the board of
Yeah.
supervisors meeting. You have to.
I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with the fourth Tuesday. I mean, that's. I mean, I know.
Right now, currently the 18th is the third Tuesday. That's Tuesday of June.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that works for me.
So we kept it on the 18th, and this is kind of I believe Jeff could probably accommodate us or a bit here, but if this is a long-term relationship, we want to really take a look at this to make it reasonable from the county side. So we don't have to make this decision today, but I think we can start getting the board kind of thinking on what makes sense. Ideally, if we move to a new schedule, it was the third Thursday would be the 25th. So again, I don't know what impact this has.
I have a problem.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to make the 25th.
Okay, is that because of a standing conflict, or is that just?
No, just, it's already on the schedule.
Well, then let me recommend that maybe we hold it on the 18th and then look at the schedule going forward as
Yeah,
shifting. And that way we have a little bit more notice.
yeah.
there's always gonna be some,
Right.
some conflict somehow.
So,
So if I understand your direction to the staff, the next meeting would be held on the eighteenth, but you want us to consider instead of for the next scheduled meeting after that to put July 23rd, which would be the
So
fourth.
I would think the July meeting, maybe the end of July. and
Okay.
The end of
There
August.
is actually added benefit to that because that is the meeting where we theoretically make a decision on the ballot measure and
mhm.
push it back by a week. It gives us another week
Yeah.
before that.
And perhaps, Caroline, if we could, maybe just send a reminder out to everybody that says, okay, for the rest of the year, starting in August, here are the dates. Reflecting that,
That we just said from July forward, correct?
sorry, July, yes, got my J's mixed up here. So July 4th,
Okay.
Okay.
Do that.
that way everybody can punch it in the calendar and it's. So next meeting is June 18th, Tuesday, in July. Any other comments or questions?
No, but I think the other thing about July or June 18th is it coincide with the 2 days after Kyle's.
He's actually gonna be here this Sunday.
Oh, this Sunday. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm here at both times.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
All right. At 2:05.
It's a long one for us.
That's a long one today.
Chief Reebok, you have it going for me.
Hey, give me a second to enter the recording.
Do you still have time? Still okay, okay.
I have a prescription dollar. And I am sure. Yeah. In